more with the esoteric arts that people can are studying in these groups. Do you think that's the case?
Certainly. Most Masonic temples, though, are just kind of like coffee klatch, meetings for people who want to, spend time with like their fellows drinking and smoking. There are other lodges that are much more interested in magic and mysticism, though they are few. Satanism is made up of Hermetic, alchemical, Kabbalistic, Masonic, and other esoteric principles. We almost kind of took a Bruce Lee approach to the black arts, taking what we felt was useful and getting rid of the dross. So yes, we certainly would have some common ground in which we could discuss various aspects of the esoteric arts. But the Church of Satan's official position on Masonry is we consider them schoolboys and beginners, definitely gray area or white magicians in comparison to what we're doing.
All right.
Boy Scouts.
I would accept that. We're coming up on the break, but I want to prepare you for the next section. I'd love to get into a little bit of Aleister Crowley, some of the connections to Sirius and Cthulhu.
Okay.
If you're ready to go into that, we'll get into that in 30 seconds on the other side. It'll actually be 3 minutes. But I'm really looking forward to getting deeper and deeper into this, and absolutely want to get deep into psychological warfare, because I know that's your area of expertise in techno magic. We're definitely going to get onto the Ragnarok engine and find out what you've got to it here with the Freezone on Oracle Broadcasting with my special guest, Magister Templi of the Church of Satan, Diabolist Rex Church. Now, Rex, many of the esoteric arts have been put into the ideas and the minds of people as a bad thing, as a dark, sinister force that should not be touched. These ideas of sex magic or getting possessed by demons, or Aleister Crowley sacrificing children. I think that a lot of this was set up to scare people off from studying the esoteric arts. What do you think?
Well, I certainly don't share a socialistic ideology of magic. I don't believe that it's the right of the people for anybody to become involved in this any more than I believe that quantum physics is something that everybody's going to choose to study but doesn't have the mental capacity to be able to grasp or develop. But I do believe that magic and the early paganistic ideas were sold as evil, essentially, by the early Christian church, because they didn't want people celebrating their natural, physical, earthly natures. Everything that the so-called seven deadly sins see in humanity every day, but as Satanists we see as just a natural aspect of the human condition. So when you have Christianity saying, well, you shouldn't be studying any of this, it is interesting to note that Christianity, which came out of Judaism, Judaism had a long-standing tradition of the Kabbalah, which was Jewish mysticism. And this involved astrology, precognition, divination, the foretelling of future events, etc., many things that you will actually find in the Western magical traditions. But it was only after the so-called coming of Christ in which all of this was reclassified as witchcraft and therefore became evil. And so therefore the only thing that an individual was allowed to do magically was pray or beg from God to help them with this problem or that problem. And if he chose not to, then you just simply suffered. Magic is all about naming and commanding, taking control of one's environment, both physical and psychic, and making things happen. It's not an entreating, it is not a begging, it is a commanding. Therefore, the language of centics, of using, what is the word that I'm actually looking for? Let's go on. Using the language specifically oriented to making something happen is eschewed in society. The use of specific words are considered wrong. Therefore, the word spell was the ability to take different letters, put them together, and make meaning out of it. This simply comes out of a tradition that says that we're not allowed to do this because it is abhorred by God. Lucifer, the so-called fallen angel, was the one who he and his cohorts brought this information to man and disseminated it amongst us so that we ourselves could make those decisions. It was only the early God of the Christian and Hebrew scriptures who said, no, you're not allowed to do any of this because I do not give you permission, because this is tampering with the elements. And anybody who knows their Bible can actually look up these scriptures that say that. So we are in complete opposition to that idea. And in so much as that all human beings have a desire to have mastery over their own destiny and to study magic, that doesn't necessarily mean that they should even be doing that. Just like people who feel creative shouldn't be allowed to have a pen or a pencil because they end up creating some kind of horrible travesty that the rest of us are forced to look at.
Well, what about worship of the devil or demonic possession? Do these things happen in ritual? Where do these ideas come from? Do they fit into the Church of Satan paradigm?
Well, if you want to go back far enough into early descriptions of demonic possession, we really didn't have descriptive terms for mental illness. And I'm sure that if any sufficiently advanced technology would be considered magic in the ancient world, that any sufficiently deranged mental behavior would certainly be seen as the result of dabbling with demonic forces in an ancient primitive culture. And therefore, I think a lot of what you were seeing there was the perhaps criminally insane or perhaps just the plain insane who had no access to any kind of psychological assistance. Perhaps there was nothing wrong with them at all. Many times, those who were seemed to have been slightly touched in the mind were some of the greatest seers and fortune tellers in history. They usually lived apart from the tribe because they were, frightening to the rest of the of society at that time. But their favor was still curried and sought after by kings and politicians whenever they felt there was a need to try and bolster up their flagging monarchies or preparatory to war or whatnot. So
they're burning witches in Salem while John Dee's giving advice to the Queen, right?
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, absolutely. It all depends on how disposable you may or may not have been at that time, and how open to and acceptable you may have been to the monarchy at that time. Grigory Rasputin was a very, very good example. He could very easily have been put to death because Russian Orthodoxy at that time may have seen him as very much a demonic force, but he had curtailed the favor of the Khazar Khazarina and was involved in being able to bring their autistic child, actually was a hemophiliac, back to life essentially. So once you've done something like that, there's a lot of room for forgiveness. So.
Well, you tell me a little bit about sex and pain and its connections with magic and how that all works. Yeah.
Well, sex is weird enough without involving it in magic. That's for sure. Most sex magic rites come out of the early traditions found in the early Vedas and in the Kundalini studies of ancient India. And then, of course, much of that went to Tibet. And I think that anytime you elevate the senses, the physical senses, to such a degree, even though they may be carnal, they seem to be transcendent to some kind of euphoric experience that's even greater. This has led certain areas within the black arts, certainly within Satanism, to think, well, perhaps there really isn't any such thing as spirituality at all. Maybe everything that we create is a manifestation of the carnal brain, and the greatest spiritual thing you can actually do is simply bring life into the world. So I think it has a lot to do with when you involve things such as sex and flagellation, various other things like that. You propel specific states because these were early forms of psychonautical magic.
All right.
Viewing
We're coming up on the break again.
Yeah.
I want to get ready to get into.
From who was talking about.
Okay, we're going now.
Okay, that's okay.
All right, and welcome back to the Freezone. Well, the ideas and concepts of techno-magic and the infernal machine are one that are on Rex Church's mind, and I hope to dig deep into his brain about this whole subject. But in October of 2008, the Scientific American put out an article asking, "Are you evil?" Profiling that which is truly wicked. A cognitive scientist employs malevolent logic to define the dark side of the human psyche. So it turns out that the hallowed halls of academia are not the place you would expect to find someone obsessed with evil, although some students might disagree, but it is indeed evil, or rather trying to get to the roots of evil, that fascinates Selmer Bringsjord, a logician, philosopher, and chairman of the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, Department of Cognitive Science. He's so intrigued, in fact, that he has developed a sort of checklist for determining whether someone is demonic, and is working with a team of graduate students to create a computerized representation of a purely sinister person. Bringsjord, the director of Artificial Intelligence and Reasoning Lab at the Polytechnic Institute, he says advances being made by him and his team, as is the case when they developed a robot known as Perry. They called this Brutus 1, and it was a program that could write original short stories, albeit with limited, sinister themes. Bringsjord goes on to say that this means defining evil, defining lying, which isn't as straightforward as it would seem. And last December, Bringsjord and a co-investigator, Konstantin Arkodos, were awarded $400,000 grant from the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, known as DARPA, the Central Research and Development Organization for the Department of Defense, to investigate issues of learning and reasoning for a project called Poised for Learning. And what we're talking about is a infernal machine. In short, Bringsjord and his team will try to produce a computer that can read and comprehend, but in the same step be completely sinister and evil to the limits of their understanding of this. So they're hoping to keep this evil entity they've created inside the computer under control. So what do you think about this idea of the infernal machine, techno-magic, and the ideas of creating and understanding evil in electronics?
Well, there's two parts to this. First of all, let's lay the groundwork for infernal machines, or what is called techno-magic. There is not, without exception, there are no magical orders in the world today who are involved in this type of study who cannot chart their pedigrees to Germany, pre-World War I, World War I, pre-World War II, and World War II for their inspiration. All this information was coming from Germany at the time. When the rest of the world, Eastern Europe and other places within that sphere, as well as in America, were diddling with the Kabbalah, the Germans had already had a long history of having applied the use of techno-magic and the newly emerging science of Tesla technology with maniacal gusto to the creation of new magical paradigms. So anybody that's involved in this type of stuff should at least acknowledge exactly where the magic is or came from that they are attempting to replicate. And it definitely comes with a pejorative taint. The program which Selmer Bringsjord has created for computer work involving descriptions of evil is, at least from my perspective, somewhat simplistic, because by this definition he is saying that there is a specific type or definition for characteristics and actions which are defined as evil. Most of them are, uncomfortably for him, Christian-oriented in their description, which I find strange for a